Thank you, completely nobody. I do find that it is challenging, and that's actually what I prefer about it. Very Baroque, very purple, which I actually prefer. It brings out the most evocative and conscriptive features of the literature, and that it does not simply allow one to fumble flaccidly through the work and meander into whatever conclusion that they might very well, even with the capacity for the individual to bring out their own ideation, vision properly of the surrounding scenery. It necessitates, pushes into a mold the things that Lovecraft himself even would say in many stories is entirely and completely unnameable. So your world building, is it for a writing project or a game setting of some sort? Mine is a D&D setting that I started back in '99 when the 3rd edition was released. Well, funny you should say that. Mine started back in 2017 as a homebrew for 5e, but eventually, moving further and further away from everything that constituted the standard cosmologies and mythos of Dungeons & Dragons, I'd always been interested in writing in the first place, and that this was a setting that myself and the other person that I was doing this with, in a strict duet, means we got to explore it a great deal for years on end to 2024, where there's always movies and series and music and that sort of thing that was a nice sprinkle and punctuation here. None of it ever quite fulfilled the same role as being able to command your own story. So it went from just a simple homebrew to something we hope to make compatible with 5e to, well, now this is something entirely separate. A lesser known story indeed, nobody. I consider that the Quest to Unknown Kadath, while it is indeed very obscure to most who do appreciate Lovecraft's work, they do, unfortunately, know him for some of his longer pieces that are, I don't think, nearly as expressive of his ultimate conception of the mystic ethereal realms of dream as a whole, like The Color Out of Space. Although I have heard that that is his favorite piece that he has written, and I understand why, but I don't know. Bringing to bear an entire realm which is completely defined by Lovecraft's own look into this scenario, this metaphysic of his own, I think that it's easily the best pick. It's a phenomenal rendering of a tributary and its interaction with hills. Something that often gets written out entirely in favor of a specific design is the nature of waterways, especially in forested regions. They tend to not have any place they pour down from in tributary rivulets or have any kind of a sensible system for lakes or deltas or inland seas. Obviously, we haven't seen the whole map yet, but judging by what we have from the rest of the writing and its art, how it's been applied, so I anticipate that this one, and definitely here at its ending portion with a very small pool, has some rationale behind it on that front. The evocative emotion of his work is most often dread. This one is wonder or curiosity. I am inclined to agree, but I think actually it presents a fantastic mix of both. What I think is so profound and special about the Dream-Quest of Unknown Kadath is that it blends not only the typical dread that everybody knows Lovecraft for, and the terror, I think, that comes along with that, as sometimes the main course and sometimes a supplemental piece. And what I think the very best of every single world that is built is that it shows both the absolute brilliancy, scintillation, excellence, in addition to the misery, trepidation, tribulation that underlies those magnanimous elements and aspects. Lovecraft in this story brings out vitality. To my mind, tidal rivers seem to be criminally overlooked as an environment, especially strange considering we're a species that really likes to settle near them. I agree. Of all of the things that continues to strike me most fiercely about constructed geography and settlements thereupon, the fact that so many places are stuck in the most hostile or unforgiving of environments to life that have absolutely no explanation for their being there. For there to be such a place within this game in particular, I think that it is genuinely one of the better examples of rationale applied to one's world. Far too often, and it does have its own place, I fully admit it, but the wanton drive to make an extremity of stories, not just the worlds that they're contained in, of good or bad, bumping up the contrast to unbelievable magnitudes is a cancer in the overwhelming majority of settings that attempt to produce something that is simulatory, living and breathing. And even worse than that, I think you've seen certain executions of various stories, like my understanding of a lot of Joss Whedon's interpretations of the Marvel universe taking on irony, to borrow in one of J-Reg's terms, irony poisoning. And deltas too. Marshes and swamps, as much as they may be riddled, depending on the specific biome, with pests like mosquitoes and leeches and that kind of thing, they have unbelievable quantities of utility for any kind of settlement, even up to full-blown states. I think that it comes probably from our recent history of draining as many swamps as possible to make way for something that is more familiar and perhaps easier to navigate by our standard conventions. But particularly when you start looking at other species, besides just lizard folk and that kind of thing, terribly underutilized anything really but flat open plains and the more extreme environments that in and of themselves require a great deal of expoundation to make their existence admirable. I think that I approach this whole cosmos, particularly because what I am writing, the settings that I am developing and have played through, at least in its most rudimentary and precursory forms, was so. There's grimdark and then there's strict fantasy, and I wanted a strong mixture of both that actually made it feel like there's something there, a place beyond this, some realm that not only encapsulates the one that we exist in now, but also any that could possibly be dreamt of, which is why it's taking me so long to work on the cosmology in order to support that, actually. The Panatrivium standard model, it's bent entirely around allowing narrative verisimilitude and consistency, while also enabling the most expressive power possible. One of the world's greatest cities, Venice, is basically built in a swamp. Not basically, factually built in a swamp. Their draining and water collecting, complete acceptance and integration of canals and the various gondolas and other forms of vessel, how they deal specifically with waste, and the manner of preventing flooding and the collapsing of individual structures with their strong compacted foundations, but also the sorts of things that you can do in these kinds of environs are so much more varied. I don't think I've ever seen any settlement in fiction even attempt to do something like Venice, or over in the Netherlands, where they have entirely dammed up rivers and floodplains they never attempt to reclaim, at least from what I've observed, in lieu of making greater and grander ones that rise from the earth in inexplicable fashion, not even justified by the modes of magic or something equivalent, are so frequent. On the particulars of where Carter has traversed so far, we have been introduced to not only the core conception of this being a departure from the physic realm into that of a spiritual, and thereabouts been immersed in the various interactions down to the linguistics, from the cats of Ultar to the zoogs of the deep slumbers forest. Thereabouts we've also known some of the less friendly and communicable species of those who dwell on the moon, the toads and their merchantry, and seen many places scattered amidst the coastlines and deep inland traverses. Thereabouts all of the vigor and wonder, terror and dread that can be derived from the Dreamlands too. All in all, a fine introduction, even if without any background knowledge heretofore, of all of the things in store for Randolph Carter, not only of this time, but also of his past. This whole town, the gradual exploration that you can make of all of its surrounding territory within reasonable scope, in addition to the appliance of just enough detail in text, which could of course be conveyed by other forms, like it does in the visual mode, but also in adaptation in the vocal sense, especially when you're looking at TTRPGs and other forms of gaming, grants us an insight into the overall aesthetic, relational basis of this scene, while also embedding it thoroughly in its environment itself and allowing the functions and activities of its occupants to define the storyline, whether it be something that, as in other more kindly settlements like Pavlovan are ongoing and lively, or here in ruins and decay, all the while allowing us the capacity to discriminate where, what, and with who we go about and perform. I think Venice is a rare case where settlers didn't have much in the way of choice. Take, for example, New Orleans. Good combination of Venice and your example of the Netherlands. To what you were saying there, nobody? I think so. And sure, they didn't have much choice, but at once, if there really was such an unabashed loathsomeness of one's environs and a lack of invention on both the parts of those of New Orleans and Venice, I don't suspect that the people would have stayed. There are a lot of blasted territories throughout history, both real and fiction, where people have come and gone. Those that leave tend not to have taken advantage of the natural scenario they find themselves amidst. I think that's the mark of stretching beyond the narrative into socio-cultural topics, of peoples who have the adaptability and resources necessary to accommodate newfound modes of living. Yes, Prime, I am familiar with Harry Potter. You know why? Because I am him. I just have a little bit of a... I changed my look in these last couple of years. Little makeup, some shears, I got the works done. A fine example of this that I have always appreciated significantly and is an inspiration for one of the species in one of my settings is the floating lake peoples of South America. I don't recall specifically where, of course, but they live together on what amounts to a flotilla, a series of connected reed rafts, which, being reeds on water, constantly require reworking and thus fuel not only an economy but a lifestyle of the entire peoples that is just anchored to shore by a small set or sometimes even one rope, depending on the detected or suspected danger that they might face. And otherwise, they dwell within the waters, making their mammalian lifestyle capable by having that dry series of platforms. Thank you, Prime Gaming. I'm glad I do look like the little riddlesome Tom. I'm aware round glasses and bald head is not something that is frequented, although it used to be throughout time, and at least being bald is a style that benefits me and my lifestyle, living here in the humid subtropicals of the South. And round glasses, I think, really do provide some benefit in not only letting you have all of the range of your normal eye's rotation, but also not occluding certain parts with the frames, especially your bigger and bulkier types. They also just look nice, I think. If you are not subscribed, if you have not liked, if you have not shared, I implore you to do all of the algorithmically required business. I thank you for attending with us here at Dreaming of a Warden, where we played Roadwarden after reading a good sum of the Dream-Quest of Unknown Kadath. Even with all my little bits and asides here and there, I hope that it is something that you do find worthy of seeking out not only this, but all of our previous content, and that to come in the future on X or Twitter, Instagram, our Discord, the Threefold at a Factory, or even directly reaching out to us through one of the various other avenues. Things are also posted in Spotify. I'm starting on BitChute, and we are getting shorts finally out on TikTok. So we have made some motion on those fronts. If you think that we might be worth supporting in any monetary regard, outside of just your time and your care and your appreciation, we have Stream Elements. If it is something you would like to make a one-time donation for, or if you'd like something in return for the money that you hand us, you could always go over to Patreon, where our most accessible tier, monetarily, is the $5 proponent, where you get such delights as the ability to watch all of the content ad-free and download it for your own personal use, in addition to any of the polls which I might host for details that regards what we might do in the future, what we might go for in terms of direction, or any minutiae. And you have the opportunity to have your own section in the Discord server, if you should be so inclined. Not to mention, you will have your name listed here at the end of every single video in the credits. I thank you all for your time. I look forward to the next time. And until then, never miss your opportunities.